a quaint village nestled among towering pine trees, there lived a sweet young girl named Rosalie, known affectionately as Little Red Riding Hood for the crimson cloak she wore on her journeys through the forest. One bright morning, Rosalie's mother called her to the kitchen and placed a basket filled with freshly baked treats in her hands. "Take these to your grandmother," she said with a smile. "But be careful, my dear, and stay on the path." Rosalie nodded eagerly, her heart brimming with excitement at the thought of visiting her beloved grandmother. With a cheerful goodbye, she skipped along the forest path, the sun dappling through the leaves above. Unbeknownst to Rosalie, a cunning wolf lurked among the shadows, his eyes gleaming with hunger as he watched her approach. With a sly grin, he devised a plan to trick the unsuspecting girl and feast on her grandmother's treats. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf greeted her, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Where are you off to in such a hurry?" "I'm going to visit my grandmother," Rosalie replied, her innocence shining in her eyes. "She lives on the other side of the forest, and I'm bringing her these goodies." The wolf's stomach rumbled at the mention of treats, but he feigned interest in Rosalie's errand. "How kind of you," he said, his voice laced with deceit. "Why don't you take the scenic route through the woods? It's much faster, and you'll arrive in no time." Rosalie hesitated, her mother's warnings echoing in her mind. But the wolf's words were honeyed, and she soon found herself straying from the path, deeper into the heart of the forest. As they walked, the wolf spun tales of adventure and excitement, distracting Rosalie from her purpose. But when they reached a fork in the road, he bid her farewell with a toothy grin, his eyes glinting with malice. "Go straight ahead, my dear," he whispered, his voice a sinister whisper. "And don't stop until you reach your grandmother's house." With a sense of unease gnawing at her, Rosalie continued on her journey, the forest growing darker and denser around her. Yet, despite her misgivings, she pressed on, determined to reach her grandmother's side. At last, Rosalie arrived at her grandmother's cottage, her heart pounding with relief. But as she stepped inside, a chill ran down her spine, for the wolf lay in wait, disguised as her grandmother. "Grandmother, what big ears you have!" Rosalie exclaimed, her voice trembling with fear. "The better to hear you with, my dear," the wolf replied, his grin widening. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have!" Rosalie continued, her pulse quickening with each word. "The better to see you with, my dear," the wolf replied, his hunger growing with each passing moment. "Grandmother, what big teeth you have!" Rosalie whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "The better to eat you with, my dear," the wolf snarled, lunging forward with outstretched claws. But before the wolf could harm her, a brave woodsman burst through the door, his axe gleaming in the firelight. With a mighty swing, he felled the wolf, rescuing Rosalie and her grandmother from certain doom. With the wolf vanquished, Rosalie and her grandmother embraced, their bond stronger than ever before. And as they shared the treats from Rosalie's basket, they knew that no matter how dark the forest may seem, love and courage would always light the way home.